Hello, I'm Rachel Richards, former BBC correspondent and parenting coach with 2 teenagers and 2 stepdaughters, and you're listening to Teenagers Untangled. Joining us is my co-host Susie Asley, qualified mindfulness coach, psychotherapist and parent of 3 teenagers.
Hi, Rachel.
For those of you listening in the bath, switch off the hot tap, lean back and let's begin. Coming up later in this episode, we talk about moody teenagers. How do you deal with it? And when is it actually a problem that needs help? But first, in the UK, according to the Office for National Statistics, there were 2.9 million lone parent families in 2020, which accounts for just under 14% of families. But that's not all. There are lots of parents who feel like they are working alone, either because their partner is away or takes little interest. Yes, that's still a thing. Now, Susie, you have been a lone parent for much of your children's life. But when it comes to teenagers, we're moving into a whole new territory, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've parented alone since I have twins, since they were 15 months and my eldest was just 4. So yeah, for years. They don't remember it being different. But yes, when they become teenagers, it changes a lot, actually.
So I'm a step parent. So I do have a different side to this. I feel both really unqualified, like I really don't know anything about this, but at the same time I do feel qualified to an extent because I've had to deal with all the emotional baggage that goes with this and the teenage years with my stepdaughters, which is when it really became fraught, because I think when they were younger they'd come and stay with us and we'd read them bedtime stories and we'd do fun things with them, but when they become teenagers you get this sort of rage at times where they're starting to do their own thing and they're not prepared to listen to your rules and they're pushing boundaries and they're sort of, I'm the woman and I had teenage stepdaughters and they would just, borrow my bikini, chuck it on the floor wet. And, you just feel really offended.
Yeah, I think step parenting is very, very tricky. And hats off to all step parents, really. I think it's a minefield. I think as with most things in life, there are definite pluses and minuses to parenting alone, both when they're little and with teenagers. I mean, there's the classic, you're doing it all yourself, which is overwhelming at times, on a physical level and on an emotional level, because you don't have anyone to chat stuff through with, or you do have friends or partners or family or whatever, but it's not the other parent, so it's different. And the plus is also that you're doing it all on your own sometimes. I mean, sometimes it's easier.
Yes.
Because you can make your own decisions and you can, you don't have to, it's more simple sometimes. So there are definitely pluses and minuses. I think, my children, their dad lives abroad. So for us, it's a bit different from maybe other families. So they are with me most of the time, and then they go to their dad in Denmark for holiday time. So when they were little, that was kind of exciting and easy. As they get older, they have other things here, so it becomes more complicated. And I know I'm not alone in that, and it's not just because they their dad lives abroad. They have things they want to do with their mates. They don't want to miss out. So it becomes a bit like, it can be a bit of a dilemma for them. They want to see their dad. They want to spend time with him, and they don't want to miss out on the stuff here. So they start to push back a bit on whether they go at all and for how long and all of that. And it becomes complicated.
And it's easy for the other parent to feel that it's actually about them, whereas it's not. It's about the teenager now wanting to form their own groups of friends and doing things with their friends in the holidays. And that happens whether you're in this particular situation or whether I'm seeing other parents now saying, my teenagers don't want to be with us on our holidays. And this is a very difficult transition anyway, but it's increased.
Yeah, and it's difficult for the kids because they feel really torn. They they want to be with the other parent. Of course, they miss them, they want to see them, and they also know that the other parent wants to see them, so they don't want to disappoint, and they want to be a normal teenager and be with their mates. So it's quite kind of tricky to navigate sometimes and we have to, as parents, if we can, which is really hard, be really emotionally mature in it and see it from their perspective and try and not take it personally or be too disappointed if they don't want to spend that time with us, which is really hard.
And there was a really heartbreaking exchange I saw, which was between a parent who said she was really angry about the way her child was behaving. Her children hadn't done their jobs at home and they'd gone away for the weekend with their father. And she felt like she was just having to do everything at home and they were not contributing at all, even though they were teenagers and they knew what the role was. They were supposed to be putting their linen in the linen basket and they just left everything all over the room. And one mother responded and said, actually, I was that teenager having to go to another parent's house. And it's really stressful because you're living out of a bag all the time. And every weekend you're somewhere else. Yeah. And she said, this is a very upsetting thing for some teenagers. And there was another person who pitched in and said, when I was 15, I moved in with my father and that was it. My mother wasn't involved. And we burnt my bag. And the bag symbolised all the transient movements and the difficulty of having to be in one house. And, it's like living out of a suitcase when you're in a hotel. Yeah. So there is an element of that.
There can be. I think it's different for different children and for different circumstances.
You're absolutely right.
It depends on how they deal with that and how the parents manage it, I think, as well.
Yes.
It's different. But definitely there can be an element of that.
Yes. And adolescents tend to want to move away from the control of their parents. So there will be an element of pushback. And when you're a lone parent, it can be that they will take advantage of your situation. So they might ask the other parent for something.
Oh, totally. They're really smart kids.
Yes.
They really know what's going on. They might not like everything. They know if there's a game to be played, they know what that looks like.
And would you be using mindfulness techniques for things like that? So, you've got a situation where one parent has said, oh, well, yes, you can have your phone unlimited use. And the other parent is saying, no, we need to control this.
Yeah.
For a situation like that, how would you help a parent cope when they feel that they're being undermined by the other parent as well?
It's a really good question. Yeah, I really lean on my mindfulness massively. And I think it's a really good way to separate, how much of this is triggering me as a person and as, maybe there's fallout from the old relationship, which there always is. And I used to be pretty judgmental actually before I got divorced. I would be, looking at parents who'd got divorced and they seem to be making a bit of a hash of it, in my humble opinion. And, why could they not just park their rubbish and, get on with it for the kids? And it was really, surely that's obvious, right? And then it happens to you. And it's really, really hard. It's really, really painful. And depending on, why your relationship broke down and all of the ins and outs. But it's really hard and it's very, very triggering. So mindfulness is very helpful.
Yeah.
And it's learning our own triggers. What's triggering me? Is that something to do, something that's really old that's triggering me with my ex so I can deal with that myself? Or is it something to do with the kids in this moment, and how can I manage that? But it's always building that buffer zone between our trigger, our knee-jerk reaction, which can be really strong in a painful situation like that, and going away from the situation, taking a breath, literally leaving the room if you have to, taking a breath so that you can come back.
You don't have to do things. You don't have to say things. That's a very interesting point. And I think for me, as someone who's parented in a way where I had a partner who literally was emotionally and mentally absent from the, I think the experience that I've had means that I've learnt communication that's very clear. No expecting. If you kind of think that person should have anticipated this and this is what I need, but I haven't actually been very clear about it, then you can't really expect them, particularly if it's somebody you're divorced from. But even when it's your partner, if you're not prepared to say, well, this is really what I need, and being clear about it, then it's not, you're going to get nowhere to where that can happen.
Yes.
So, when I've coached parents where they've got two people who parent in very different styles, it's often about trying to say to them, so you need to actually sit back and think what actually matters to me here, and pick your battles. But when you do have an important thing that needs to be done or said or negotiated, don't be emotional about it. You need to actually write it down and say, okay, you can say, well, here are my emotions about it, but here are the facts and here is what I need to convey, and then explain it. And I found that by being much clearer about what I want has made a big difference to getting what I want.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I really like that, because we get really emotional with it. I mean, I definitely have done that. And even though I've been doing this for years, it's still, I still have to, it's a massive red flag. But to try and take the emotion out, because I think when we're co-parenting, or whatever name you want to give it, when you're divorced and the parents are not living together, there's a lot of practical logistics involved, and emotions aren't really helpful, but they obviously get totally tangled up in that.
And
it's
also
hard.
just writing a list of all the things you're having to do, and then saying, well, what are the easy fruit here that I can hand over? That's not about a power struggle with the partner, or it's actually something where I can find someone else who can fit in with this.
Absolutely.
Even if it's a friend or somebody, trying to just offload some of those difficult things.
And what can I let go of emotionally as well? Because I think we have, and it's all about expectations, isn't it? Like you were saying, it's our expectations, as well as, the communication of them, but our expectations from a starting point. Because when they are with their dad, that they're with their dad, and that's different. That's not going to be as I do at home. And if I'm trying to make it that way, or being frustrated in any way, who's that helping? Who's that serving? Nobody. It's just really getting on my nerves. So what can I let go of? And I actually got to the point when they were younger where I thought, okay, they are loved and they're safe. The end.
Yes,
that's it.
Yes.
Everything else is details.
Such a great point. And I think
that's hard to practice.
But there are benefits also to them being in an environment which is a bit different.
Yeah,
because it is hard, because teenagers will say, well, who should I be listening to? But at the same time, you can say, no, I see the rules this way for this reason. Yes. Your other parent sees them this way. He has his own reasons. And I can see, and actually the teenager starts to see that there aren't black and whites, and life can be done differently. The thing is, you have to think what's best, and I'm doing what I think is best for you. Then somehow you can navigate that in a positive way, so that they learn to pick and choose what really matters to them.
I actually think it can be a massive gift, because I think you can have it, like you say, you have two different cultures. I mean, mine have actual different cultures because it's a different country, but each family has its own culture.
Sure.
And when we're only in one, we think that's the normal and that's how the whole world is, which is also okay. That was how I was brought up. But I think it's a gift to say, okay, well, they do it differently here and they do it differently here. Ergo, there must be lots of ways of living. Like suddenly the whole world has opened up. And when they become teenagers, they are really able to see that, okay, well, dad does it that way, mum does it that way. And as you say, if you explain it, well, I'm sure dad absolutely has his reasons for doing that. Even if you don't know what they are, even if you disagree, you can go, I don't know what they are, but I'm sure he has his reasons, and this is how we do it here.
Yes. Now I want to talk about, dating and having someone else in the relationship. And one of the things that I did see in terms of male and female role models was, if there's not somebody around, so whether they're traveling a lot because they're in the army, or they're working away a lot, or they're just not, they're absent most of the time. Let's say you're male at home and you've got the wife's out at work all the time, and you're trying to give role models. You're trying to explain how the world works, because teenagers are now thinking, okay, what kind of adult am I going to be? What kind of relationships will I form? Who are my people I'm looking up to? If that other person's away all the time, you need to be looking for opportunities to be positive about the opposite sex, particularly if the other person's toxic with you or in that relationship. So rather than say, they're all like that, you really need to say, but there's this other man who does this, or there's this other woman who's working like that. So there are lots of ways to be a woman.
Yes.
There are lots of ways to
key.
be a man. And also, I'm not the only woman in the world.
Yeah.
And the way that I'm living my life is just, a function of how my life has panned out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, I did find it when the kids were younger, and they have, different developmental phases, and we're talking about teenagers. And I have 2 boys and a daughter. And for the boys, I was always really aware of trying to find them male role models because, they're in a school environment where, they were quite lucky. They had some male teachers, but when they were younger, it's predominantly female. But they do have male, but also, friends, dads, and it's really important. I found that quite tricky, actually. And I'm not sure I was super successful with it, but it was definitely an awareness I had, because they go through developmental stages where they need the same sex as a mirror, as a, how do I be a man?
Yes.
And look at it, and they have got a dad, of course, but they they see him for much less of their time. Yeah.
Yes. Chunks of time. Really so when it comes to dating, I know that your new relationship is not that old. And how have you navigated, having a new partner or, dating in the past?
Yeah, interesting question. I haven't checked with him. I can talk about this. I'm sure.
Okay,
no, I'm sure it's fine. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. No, we've been really careful, actually. He has children and is divorced, and we've been really aware and careful, because it's. I mean, they're older. It's very, very different. So there's more time now, and I think we talked about it earlier in a previous podcast about how suddenly your teenagers are off and you suddenly have time on your hands. And I think that's even more exaggerated, or what it was for me anyway, because with 3 small kids for years on my own, that was my life. And then suddenly they're off doing their own thing, and I was left going, I need to get a life. Maybe I should try and date. And yeah, so we've been really cautious and careful, and it's really lovely, actually. The kids are amazing. They're brilliant. And a kind of, I think there's a slight element of relief that
Mummy's not on her own.
Not on her own. And someone likes her. That's good.
That's a really good point. Is my mum lovable?
Fun. It's really fun, and they're enjoying it. It's really, really good.
So for me, I met my stepdaughter's father when they were very little. So I've been through the entire thing. I didn't meet them as teenagers, but I have been through the teenage years. And from what I've read, girls who have a stepmother, that's one of the most difficult things to navigate, because there's the jealousy, the feeling that one of my stepdaughters, when she was very little, just kept saying she didn't want me there. And, when I picked her up and put her on my knee and I said, why do you feel like that, sweetie? She said, because then my daddy won't love me. And it was very sweet, because it was really poignant, because she could express it. And I said, darling, that's impossible for your daddy to not love you. Yeah. But, a teenager probably won't say that. No. They'll just act out in other ways.
Yeah. And you have to have antennae out. I mean, particularly with my daughter, I'm really aware. And we're both really aware. He's brilliant at being aware of that, so that she doesn't feel, because we're quite close and we do spend time together with the boys as well. But it's different. I think it's a bit different. That she doesn't feel that somebody's coming in and taking me away from her. That it's an addition, not a deficit.
And that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that they need to feel it's an addition, but there's this very important understanding that, again, it was in a talk with Eric Sigman all those years ago, when I said, that I'm seeing some concerning behaviour from my stepdaughters. What do you think? And he said, I'm just going to tell you now, you don't really have much control there. No. You are the stepmother. This is not the same thing as being a parent, and you need to understand that. And navigating it's going to be much more complex. And in a way, you kind of have to accept that you're not, and you need to be asked to be their parent.
Yes.
They need to make that decision, not the other way round. And you're never going to, I've said to my stepdaughters, I'm not your mum. I'm never going to be your mum.
No.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to do that.
No, I think when they're little, it's very different. I mean, I haven't been a step parent when my kids were little, so I don't know what that would have been like. But I think when now they're teenagers, I think it's very different, because they are they're just a different stage developmentally. They don't need another parent to come in and nurture them sort of physically in that way anymore. So it's more of a friendship-based thing. And I think that can be really beautiful if you navigate it well. And I think for the kids, it's a sort of balance, for mine anyway, I can only talk about my own, a balance between they want me to be with somebody because they can see that that's really nice for me, and they're also off doing their own thing. Nobody wants to think of their mum sort of sat on her own home. Not that I've got lots of friends, just putting out there, but that it's a nice thought for them that I'm not on my own, and I'm still their mum, and we have been this really tight unit for years. So, what's that like? How's that going to work? I remember my daughter coming in. I was having a shower once. She was a bit younger, and I had a relationship that had ended, and we talked about it, and then we talked about, we'll find someone else, and just wait and see. And she just came in and she go, Mum, that you're going to find someone else. It's not going very well, is it? I just roared with laughter. It was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. And but there's this element that they want it. They want you to be happy. They want you as a parent to be happy.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah,
it's not always that simple. I know somebody who has taken on the children of her partner who have been very damaged by the relationship with their mother, who in fact, the court has ruled that they can't have access to her. And they're teenagers, and it's very, very, very difficult. And the one thing I said to her because she said, I'm having to parent them. I've got no choice about it. And the difficulty I've got is I've got two teenagers who've been brought up by me in the house. And then I've got these two teenagers who've had this chaotic upbringing, and it's really complicated and difficult. And she said, whenever I try and tell them they need to do something, I get the eye roll and I get the back chat and and the only advice I could give her was to couch every time she says, you need to do this, and she gets some pushback, is to say, isn't it awful to have somebody who really cares about you in your life? I'm not your mum, I know, but I actually really care, and I'm trying to do the best for you so that you turn into a human being that feel successful. And that's the best you can, it's about sort of just being explicit about what you're trying to, that you're not trying to crush their nascent power and their adulthood. Is that actually you're just as another parent, another person in the home who can be there for them. And
they will see that, but because teenagers they'll push back. They'll push back with whatever. That's a really, really difficult situation for her to be in, but they will hear it and it will go in.
Yes. This is it. It's that I think what often happens with parents that I talk to is they say, my teenager won't tell me anything. Don't believe your teenager isn't listening. Just don't believe it. When they look emotionally closed off, or they're just like, my mum's always... Inside, they're crying out for love and attention. So you just have to, like your fantastic mantra, it's not personal.
It's not personal.
It's not personal. You have to sort of just really keep checking in with them and saying, okay, where are we now? So if you've got a new partner, don't bring them in immediately. So I was dating my husband for 6 months before I met his children, even though they were little, and he was immediately keen for me to meet them. And I said, they don't need a parade of women going through their life. They need stability. So we need to know that we're in a relationship for definite before this we start introducing children into this mix. And I think that's still the case with teenagers, because they're looking at what you're doing. How is my parent? How is my dad treating other women? How is my mum dating? And they're constantly taking cues from how you behave.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely critical, and also to build the basis of a good family home life. I spoke to all my kids, not so much my eldest, because it was just seemed to be less relevant. He has a girlfriend and who stays over, so. We did have a conversation, but with my twins, I spoke to them both on their own and said, "This is what we're thinking of. How do you feel about that? Not even is that all right with you, but how do you feel about that?" And they reacted amazingly. They were brilliant, and each time, just for quite a long time, to start with, "Is that all right with you? How do you feel?" Until it wasn't necessary anymore. But they really appreciated it. I mean, my boy made joke to start with. He was like, "Yeah, it's fine. Is this family therapy?" But But he did appreciate it.
Do you want it to be family therapy?
Yeah, we can do that too. Come sit down, darling. But I explained it in a way that, we've been here, the four of us, as this, a very close-knit unit, thank you. And somebody else coming in, however that looks like, whether it's for a little bit, a lot, whatever, we're in this together. How do you feel about it? I just want everyone to feel comfortable, but I don't want to also ask too many questions and make it weird the other way. So it's a balance.
One of the other things is, in terms of if you get a blended family, the teenagers, it's really important not to just look at them as free babysitting, for example, because they will just end up resenting the situation. And I'd love some tips from you, because of your mindfulness background, on how parents who are, they feel the huge stress of being a single parent or a lone parent, or what if your children are really overreacting, they're being teenagers, what kind of and your partner is being very difficult or doing things differently, are there key things that you tend to do to help yourself sort of cope and navigate?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes more successfully than others. Lockdown was quite stressful, with 3 teenagers, totally just the 4 of us, and at the same time my eldest had very horrible back issues, so it was quite a stressful time, and obviously we couldn't escape and vent with other people. So it was really relevant then, and it's just basics that are doable. So even I've practiced mindfulness for years and have tools, but you can do really quick things, and I used it even yesterday. I was having a conversation with my eldest, which was a bit of a tricky conversation, and I said, we were both a bit, and I said, right, I'd like to speak to you. I just need 5 minutes of your time. And I went into his bedroom, and I just backtracked and went, actually, do you know what? I need to go away and think about what I want to say. I'm not ready to talk right now. I'll come back in 10, 15 minutes. And he was like, oh, okay, that's good. And we did. So we had a calm conversation rather than a rah.
I love that. Whether you're at loggerheads one-to-one with the other parent, whether you're with your child and you're trying to navigate something very difficult, we have this tendency in this quick response culture that we have to say something immediately.
Knee-jerk.
No, it's actually great to step away and think, okay, really what's going on here?
And go away and think, yes. And he really appreciated that. He was like, okay, that's fine. So doing that, and you don't have to answer, you don't have to fix things immediately, and it's often not very helpful.
Yes.
Take a breath, balance your nerve, because our nervous system goes into spasms and it's rebalancing that, and that is through the breath. And
I think an interesting one would be, because I've read a lot about journaling and how helpful that can be. And one of the big complaints I've heard from people who've lived as teenagers with divorcing parents is that one of the parents will vent to the teenager about the other parent. And we'll come on to this next week, because I have some great fun thing about what kind of parent are you,
Brilliant.
Parenting styles. And you don't want to be the friend. You're not a friend, you're a parent. So it's really important that you don't keep telling the teenager the terrible things the other parent did. Don't talk about that. You need another way to vent.
Yeah.
And so you need to actively think, right, I need a release valve. Where's it going to be? Because it can't be the teenager, because you will push them away.
Well, it's on another level. It's only painful for them to hear bad things about the other parent, because they love both parents.
Yeah.
They might even have a difficult relationship with one of the parents, but they love them, and it's only really painful for them to hear bad things. It's really confusing and never useful.
And that's part of that's half of their DNA.
Yeah,
right there. So you're saying stuff that sounds like it's part of who that person is.
And it's so tempting. Like, oh my God, it's tempting. And, you give, of course they pick up on if something bigger is up and it's difficult, of course they pick up on it, but they also hear the words you're using, and they, it's really important that we can be emotionally mature enough to not do that.
Yes. Are you a single parent, or just having to fly solo a lot of the time? What kind of stresses do you have to deal with? Who's got your back when things are tough? Do you allow yourself time out in the week? We'd love to hear from you. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or help@teenagersuntangled.com. Now, Simon is living with what some people might call a typical teenager. He says, my son is mostly moody with the odd spell of thunder. It brings everyone down. What can I do about it? And how do I know if it's just typical teenager or something worse? Yeah. Now, I've done some research on this. It's really interesting because the changes that happen in the teenage brain start when the hypothalamus releases a protein called kisspeptin. And this triggers the pituitary gland to release testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. And those hormones are the things that stimulate the changes we recognize in puberty. Now, these high levels of hormones make them ultra responsive. So, there's no other time in your life where this quantity of hormones and slightly unbalanced hormones are coming out. And so, for example, if they hear a sad song, they're going to feel much more intensely about that. And I remember the book High Fidelity, where who was I can't remember the author's name, but he was just saying, I don't know if I'm sad because the songs I'm listening to are sad, or whether I'm listening to sad songs because I'm sad.
Brilliant.
And it sums up teenage years.
It does,
when you're just listening to these really depressing lyrics. And I was Depeche Mode.
Yeah, and it feels a bit delicious, doesn't it, to feel that horrible sadness.
I stick that knife in a bit harder and cry a bit more. It's very funny. So that we this is something we all recognise and almost all of us have gone through. Yeah. And teenagers are also prone to higher levels of anxiety, and they're not just being dramatic. There's the hormone allopregnanolone, which is released in the brain in times of stress. It calms us down, but this hormone changes during puberty mean that it can actually have the opposite effect in teenagers.
Gosh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And these circadian rhythms, which are being messed up because of the changes in the sleep pattern. And that, again, makes it harder for them to respond in a very level way. Yeah. So we're asking a lot of our teens.
Yes.
And the main advice I got was basically educate your teen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. I'm just definitely going
Do you have moody teenagers?
Oh, yes.
Really?
Yeah. Totally.
Mine have thunderclouds that just pass.
Yeah.
And then there are tears, and then it's gone.
Yeah, no, they've. I mean, I have 3, and they're very different with their moods, very different. And I think it's on different levels, as most things. It's how do we respond to it? How does it trigger us? It's not personal mantras I find helpful in that situation. As they're telling you to get lost and get out of your room and all of that kind of stuff. It's not personal. And then also helping them deal with it, because it can be a bit overwhelming and frightening for them. I had one of my boys was, it was a while back now, but he'd get these waves of anger, and he's not an angry kid at all. And it would be like, I don't know what's going on. I just don't know what's going on. And I found it helpful with mine is to give and it's, part of mindfulness as well, is the idea that everything's temporary. Nothing lasts forever, because I think we get fixed, don't we? Oh, there's this horrible feeling, I'm going to have it forever.
And this is who I am.
Yes, this is who I am, exactly. But it will pass. It's a phase. It might be a long phase, or it might last 5 minutes, but it will pass.
And that's where the facts come in. So the facts about the hormones, and then also until about 15 or 20 years ago, it was assumed that teenage behaviour was almost entirely down to those hormonal changes. Yes. It's not. It's because the brain, when they've looked at the brain scans, they've realised there's this massive rewiring that's going on in the brain. Yeah. And this really impacts on so many areas of a teenager's life. So there's a fantastic YouTube video by Dan Siegel. It's called The Adolescent Brain. I really recommend everybody sits down with a teenager and just watches that, because it's a really wonderful explanation.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. I think it's great to give them education about it. And I think it's also tuning into our own individual kids. It took me years to really understand that if they're in the middle of having a strop, just leave them alone.
Absolutely.
Because I would jump in and go, what's wrong? And tell me, and I can help, or whatever, or get triggered by it myself. And, especially for one of my kids, she just needs to go away and be on her own. And then I'll go to her, or she'll come to me, and we talk about it then, but not in the
because they're surfing a wave, and you're trying to crash the wave. They need to just get through that.
But it's our own needs to fix them.
Because as parents, it's terrifying. You look at your child and think, oh my God, what's happening? I need to fix.
You can leave them and come up into their room, maybe a few minutes later with a biscuit or a drink, and just go, you're right. Hey, do you want to chat? No, fine. Then go away. And so that they really understand that you're not trying to pry. You are just there.
And you're not reacting. You don't get dragged into that
No.
because it's very easy to panic and think, I've got this, moody, stroppy, rude teenager and feel like you need to clamp down on it straight away because otherwise they're going to turn into the most awful adult and it's all a reflection of you. No, it's not.
No,
just
no, it can feel a bit
step
shameful.
away.
I can't say, what have I done? Although setting boundaries is really good, and I actually did that yesterday with my eldest. I get that you get annoyed when that happens. There's something that particularly triggers him, and we talked about it before. And what you say, I mean, he's a bit older now as well, is unacceptable.
Oh, Susie, I'm so glad you mentioned that because it's the main issue for Simon, from what I can see, that his teen is not only having these terrible moods that we, obviously become concerned about, but it's also affecting everyone around him, which actually is quite common. And I think there are a lot of people who go through life without realizing how much their moods affect everyone else. Even my husband does this. He gets grumpy or cross and he just switches into this mode where he doesn't notice how everybody else is feeling. So you can sit at the table thinking, God, we can't have a conversation because he's in such a bad mood. So it's about helping him to see how he's affecting other people and what he can do to alleviate the tension himself. And also, it's not acceptable to drag everybody else down when you're having one of these moods. So there's a great book by Dr. Stephen Peters called The Chimp Paradox. And I love it because he talks about how we all have a chimp, which is the emotional part of our brain that responds very quickly to stimulus and tries to sabotage what we want to do. So it's the chimp. When you get up in the morning and you think, right, I'm going to go for a run. And the chimp's saying, I'm not sure you really want to do that. It's going to be hard. And look, it's cold outside. And it just tries to talk you out of all the good behavior. So we can't help what chimp we have, but it is our responsibility to train it. So this is a very useful thing to talk to your teenager about, which separates this emotional moodiness from who they are as an entire person. So being able to step away and say, that's my chimp. So we can discuss these techniques with the teenager, not when they're in the throes of a mood, and just help them find ways to release the pressure. So and in a way that's not going to impact everybody else. So do they need to walk up to their room? Okay, I'm feeling really moody. Maybe now is the time to step away until I can just, feel less like this. Do I need support from my parents? Do I need to go for a walk outside? Will that elevate my mood? What do I need to eat something? Get your teen to think through ahead of time the sorts of things that help them and let them go ahead with doing that and don't interrupt. And encouraging your teen to eat healthily for a mood boost, because this is an area that is really exciting in science, where they've started to understand that all those neurons that are in your brain, you've got the same thing going on in your gut. In fact, I think they say there are more. And which is extraordinary. So when they say, I just felt it in my gut, well, actually, that is amazing. Meaningful. That's real. Yes. And the problem is that we've ignored our guts for millennia probably. And what's been happening is you feed it food thinking that that's just an evacuation tube. It's not. So talking to your child about healthy eating and how that can stabilize their hormones, it can stabilize their moods, it can lift them. Because, when we're feeling depressed, we reach for a biscuit and then, and it becomes a vicious cycle. There's an amazing podcast I've been listening to called Gutology, which really goes into the minutiae of what's going on in your gut in a really interesting way. Yeah. And everyone, they give you top tips about how you can help your gut, how you can feed it. Yeah. So whilst this isn't a gut podcast, this is actually important. The whole nutrition thing is really important for teenagers because you are what you eat. That's
a brilliant tip. I'm going to look that podcast out. That sounds good.
Yeah. And then keeping calm is one of the best things. So while your child is riding those waves, as you said, we somehow need to find ways where we can be we can be the beach.
Yes.
That way we're the beach. Okay. And we need to stay the beach. We can't get in the water too much because it's just going to aggravate the situation.
Absolutely. Ideally. And with the caveat that we're not going to stay as the beach or on the beach, or
no,
we are going to jump in the water sometimes because we're human beings, and to have compassion with that and then explain it afterwards. I've done that multiple times, gone, that triggered me and I went crazy or whatever happened.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
And it's okay to get things wrong.
That conversation?
Yeah, it's okay. So in modelling it, so saying to kids, look, I'm not perfect.
No.
I get things wrong, but you know what? I've come back in again. We're going to talk about this.
Yeah.
And this mantra you use, it's not personal. There's
Daily.
also, this too shall pass.
Yes, absolutely.
This is not going to be a permanent, because it is that panic state of thinking, oh God, who is this? Who is this person they're turning into?
Yeah.
It's not, that's not the person.
And also the idea,
it's a transition
from mindfulness that, our thoughts aren't always true. In fact, quite often they're not. And we jump to the worst case scenario because we have that negative bias in our minds. And we, particularly with our children, because it's so triggering, it's so important to us, we jump to worst case scenario and we have, a catastrophe on our hands. And it's maybe not even that. So it's, just reminding ourselves, okay, is this actually true or did I just make all of that up?
Yes, I love that. And saying to the teenager, because sometimes they say, oh, I don't know what's wrong with me. You say, you're a teenager, darling. It's okay.
It's fine.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Stopping them from panicking about it. What kind of person are they turning into? Yeah. Parents desperately want their kids to be happy. So the big question is, at what point do we literally have to step in? Do we actually have to do something? Is it depression? Is it moodiness or is it depression?
Yeah, that's
so
a really good question.
There's a fantastic it's healthcare. I'll put all these links in the podcast at healthcareutah.edu. I looked up, and there's a Dr. Thomas Conover, who's a child and adolescent psychiatrist who's taking care of teens with and without depression. And so he was asked, well, how do you know? And he said, there are key questions I will ask. I'll never assume anything when they come to me because there are lots of cover-up behaviour. But he said, first of all, how long has this moodiness been going on? So my kid is coming home, they're sullen, they go and sit in their room, they don't come down, what's going on? How long have they been like this? Has it been consistent day after day after day? How severe is it? So is it just moodiness and irritability? Are we talking about something that looks much darker? Where they just don't want to talk about things at all, because we all get those waves of misery and happy days and everything. But when you're going in to see them and you're saying, "Are you okay? Do you want to talk?" And they go, "No, I don't want to talk." Keep at that, because at some point they may be ready to talk. Yeah. And is that youth functioning? So were they normally someone who liked going out and playing cricket? Were they somebody who used to meet up with their mates and then none of that is happening? Are they eating? Have they changed their normal functioning? So knowing what your teenager's normal is can be helpful here. But and if those three are, a little bit of a flag, it's very, very important to keep an eye on that. Yes. And always don't hesitate to get professional help if you're genuinely worried. Contact the GP early.
Yeah, I think social media can also be helpful in that, and the respect that you can kind of hear what your kids are doing in their room. That's a plus of it. And I found my eldest had a horrible backache in lockdown, and I thought, oh golly, I hope is he all right? Because that's horrible to have chronic pain every day and not be able to go out and all of those things. But then I could hear, on social media or gaming, what he was doing. He was having a great time. So I thought, he's okay. He's fine. He's okay.
He laughs with his friends. It's just me.
It's just me, which is fine. Yeah. So because I'm making him do physio every day. But he's okay. And their window of what their norm is. But that does change, doesn't it, for teenagers anyway? And also, I don't know, we can change our energy. And if they respond to that, they usually do, don't they? Like I don't know, I can be a bit silly in our house. Like if you put on music and mucking about, they'll either join in a kind of, "Mum, you're so lame, what are you doing?" kind of way, but giggling. And if they don't respond to any of that, then maybe there's,
something a bit bigger.
Just keep an eye on it. Because they will fluctuate with you. You set the tone and they usually rise with it or fall with it.
Yes. Key emergencies are any threats of acts of self-harm. Take it seriously. Yeah. I mean, you may think, oh, they're playing me, but really? Do you want to take that risk? No. Threats of acts of suicidal nature or serious aggression as well. This isn't, when there's a fine line, isn't there, when you're trying to give your testosterone-filled child a means of, and it's not just boys, girls can feel this, where they need to express it. And I've got a stepdaughter who does craft because she gets angry and she wants to be able to channel it, which is a really super healthy way of channeling it. So if they are expressing a lot of aggression, you need to find with them a way of dealing with that, or get help, because they have to. These are things that can then end up being a real problem.
Yeah, because aggression is usually a reaction to something else.
Exactly. There are lots of places to get information. There's the American Academy of Pediatrics. I've got these all American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. These are websites that you can go onto. You can pick through. There are lots of information about, what to look out for, what your child's doing. We will, on another podcast, talk about self-harm, and another one we'll talk about anxiety. These are all really big topics. So we don't want to sort of spend the next 5 hours.
Brilliant. They have lots of information, really brilliant, as long as we're not then sort of going, oh my God, they've got everything.
yeah, exactly. And rather than the teenager just going through a teenage spell.
Oh, they are, clinically depressed, because they've got all these symptoms, the information's brilliant.
Yes, and books for managing to sort of unpick how you do these things. If you can't, because not everyone has the money or the access. If the local health centre can't give you help, there are ways. And actually, what's been amazing about COVID is that these problems have now become much more talked about. And there are lots of people you can reach out to online who do online therapy, not simply one-to-one.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, which is very, very helpful. Yeah. I would also say if they are miserable, depressed, whatever, people feel like this is intrusive, but you really need to see what they're accessing online. It's very important, because there's been a lot of talk about this. So I'm sure a lot of parents are aware, but there are... and they haven't all been shut down. There are groups and sites on various social media which encourage people's depression, and they encourage, and they may feel like they need to self-medicate, so they may start trying to turn to drugs to lift their mood. Yeah. So stepping in and saying there are ways you can help if you're feeling depressed, there are things that we can do, and I'm with you, and I want to help you if you feel that you want some help. Yeah,
absolutely. And trying to judge how to talk to our specific kids. I know just with my 3, I mean, I can, as I've said before, I can only talk about my own 3, but I would approach it in a very different way with all of them, because, some of them, 2 of them are really private. So if I was to go right now, so you sit down with me and talk about them, they'd be like, there's nothing wrong, nothing. So we have to learn how to listen to our
you can leave
kids.
Information out. So you can say...
or just, in other areas that they're talking, if you're always available to listen and tune into how do they talk, then you already have that channel.
So true. And so true. I mean, on an aside, it's so interesting that I've realised as my teenagers grew up, my stepdaughters, that you kind of have to find the channel that they use to communicate. Yeah. So one of them, if I WhatsApp, I'll always get a response.
Yes.
Well, mostly. No, actually, that's not true. It's just a bit flaky, but it doesn't matter. And the other one is always Facebook, for example. And that's why I'm on these social media platforms, why I went originally, because I thought, they're on, obviously there's a way they communicate. Yes. As an adult, you can't be on Snapchat. Everybody thinks you're a pervert if you're on Snapchat. You're over, 15, 16. So you have to find the platform where they will respond.
Yes,
because sometimes they don't want to talk to you. They just want to find a different way.
And times of day as well, like one of mine, it's bedtime. Another one, it's the morning, and another one, it's if there's food involved, then he'll come. So
that would be me.
What we do. We go, do you want to go and get some junk food if I think something's up? Okay.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, they're so smart. If you're a bit distracted or stressed or something's going on in your life, they're going to be like, where's mum? Where's mum? Yeah. And then they don't, maybe not conscious about it. They don't know how to get a response. So, she normally responds if I am grumpy or shout a bit. So I'm going to do that. So it's all of that.
All of it. It's so complicated. Right. That's why we're here. This could go on forever.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be old ladies going, and then the teenagers. Anyway.
Absolutely.
Next week, we'll look at different parenting styles, like the Ice King, the hot and cold tap, and how to be a true parent.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's a really fun exercise. I used to do it in Parent Gym, so I have them to thank for it. And I'm a hot and cold tap, but we'll come on to that.
I don't know what I am. I don't know all the categories yet.
No,
Exciting.
really. And then there's dealing with bullying, this time focusing more on the boy's perspective. We're going into this because our last podcast about dealing with navigating friendship groups and helping your child, and particularly focusing on the girls, has gone nuts. It's obviously a massive thing for parents, and because it's very upsetting.
Yeah.
And I relate to that.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I think we need to, let's go at it from a different angle and look at how boys fare, because they struggle with just all their own stuff. So, and you can help me with that because I don't have any boys.
I'd love to, if I can.
But I'll ask my husband because he's had lots of experience.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear from you. We can be found on Facebook and Instagram. You can email us at help@teenagersuntangled.com. Don't forget to subscribe and review us on places like Spotify and Audible, so you don't miss an episode. And tell your friends.
Yes.
Right, you've made it to the end of this episode. If you're still in the bath, that water has probably gone cold. You could get out now, or maybe a little top up with a hot tap and take 5 more minutes just for you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye for now.